The moment the college entrance exams ended, the school beauty dragged me away in front of the entire class, straight into the small grove behind campus. Before I could even process what was happening, she suddenly kissed me. That soft, dizzying scent hit me all at once. Then she looked at me, her voice trembling with tears.
Yifan,
I will give you my heart, everything I have from this day on. Just promise me one thing, and my whole life is yours. I froze on the spot. Her mother was critically ill. She needed 600,000 for surgery. Immediately, to a rich second-generation slacker like me, 600,000 was only half a month of allowance. But I rejected her without a second of hesitation, because the heart of a genius, Ice Queen Beauty, seemed quite precious. Unfortunately, I've never believed in love. My parents married for the sake of family interests and maintained a model couple image for over 20 years. Did they actually have hearts? Maybe they did, but their hearts were given to people on the outside. So don't talk to me about hearts. I don't believe it. I straightened my back and walked up to her, standing a full head taller than her. I could clearly see her trembling eyelashes and the glistening tears hanging from them. I reached out my hand. She froze for a moment, instinctively closing her eyes. My finger lightly flicked her forehead. Chuchotzi was stunned, opening her eyes and looking at me in confusion. I withdrew my hand, staring into Chuchotzi's eyes. I said slowly,
Chu Gusi,
listen carefully. Right now, do you want me to be a scumbag who takes advantage of you? Or do you want me to be a kind person who shows some mercy and gives you a hand? She was completely bewildered, staring at me blankly. Her brain had clearly crashed, but I was very patient, just watching her like that. Finally, she snapped out of it. Her tense shoulders instantly slumped. Chuchotzi, with a sliver of humble hope, her voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz. Help me. I beg you. I shook my head decisively.
Im Neulandrupist.
While I have plenty of money, I won't spend it where it's not necessary. After all, 600,000 is enough for dozens of Napoleons. The plea in her eyes instantly turned to despair. Seeing her looking so broken, that streak of malice in my heart vanished. I shifted the tone. However, while I don't want to be a scumbag or a saint, we can be business partners. I remember your grades are excellent. You're a high-potential asset for the future. So I can lend you the money as a personal investment. I can transfer the 600,000 to you right now. An unbelievable surge of joy flashed in her eyes. But I have one condition. In 10 years, you must pay me back 1 million. The interest isn't that high. It shouldn't be hard for you. At the same time, you must get into Tsinghua or Peking University in the exams next month. This is the first proof of your repayment potential, and it's the risk control clause of this investment. She acted as if she'd grabbed her last lifeline, nodding vigorously immediately, terrified that I might change my mind. I gave her my phone number and turned to leave, too lazy to see what expression she had. Walking out of the woods, the sunlight hit my skin, feeling warm and cozy. In truth, I didn't care whether she paid me back or not. 600,000 is really nothing to me. The contract terms were just for show. Otherwise, every random nobody would come begging for money. No matter how much I have, I can't afford to burn through it like that, spending 600,000 to buy the self-satisfaction of doing a good deed today, and to admire the school beauty's desperation up close. It's not a bad deal. After talking to the lawyer, I set a time and place, and forwarded the contract to Chuchotzi. That settled it. I started walking toward my original destination, a club activity classroom. I could see the scene inside through the window. My childhood friend, Zhang Li, was chatting passionately with a thug-looking youth. The Zhangs and my family are old family friends. Our business ties are close, so Zhang Li and I are practically childhood sweethearts. That's all fine. The main thing is Zhang Li's sister, Zhang Shui, a true chosen one of heaven, beautiful, ruthless in her methods. Most importantly, she takes special care of me. Every time she gives me allowance, it's in the millions. For someone like me, just idling through life, she's practically a walking human ATM. Moreover, Zhang Shui is about to get engaged to my pretentious older brother, Yeyun. She'll be my official sister-in-law. A match made in heaven. My life as a wealthy slacker is even more secure. But recently, for the sake of some thug, Zhang Li's grades plummeted from the top to the middle. When Sister Zhang Shui specifically asked me about the situation, I knew I had to step in. After all, since I took her money, I should do something for her. Before I could open the door, I collided head-on with a boy running out. He stumbled back 2 steps, his eyes full of humiliation and resentment. I recognized him. He seemed to be a poor student Zhang Li once sponsored. His grades were quite good, and he was an honest kid. Looking at him now, it's 80% likely a tragedy where he fell for his benefactor, and the benefactor fell for a thug. I shook my head, feeling a bit like laughing. The kid is still too young. For rich kids like us, paying to get things done is often just a habit, pastime to show off our status. It doesn't mean we are good people. If you really want to show gratitude, then strive to climb the social ladder and repay them with benefits. That's how the world actually works. Insisting on involving emotions is just asking for pain. I ignored him and pushed open the ajar door. Zhang Li was chatting with Sun Yang, laughing flirtatiously. Seeing it was me, Zhang Li's smile froze on her face. Her brow furrowed immediately, her tone full of suspicion and impatience.
Yifan,
What are you doing here? Are you also here to tell me to break up with Aeyong? Let me tell you, don't waste your breath. You're just the waste young master of the Yi family. You can't even figure out your own life. What right do you have to manage me? I wasn't angry. I actually felt like laughing. I don't care about you. I'm just curious. How did the Jiang family's good girl, always so obedient, suddenly fall for a guy like this? Zhang Li raised her voice, dripping with disdain. What do you know?
Ayang,
Is nothing like you hypocritical rich kids. He's authentic. He's free. She clung to Sun Yang's arm, her face filled with almost fanatical admiration. This is what it means to truly live. Your scripted lives are just boring. A complete waste of life. Then she turned her sights on me, especially you.
Yifan,
You can't study. You can't even party. Other than being a Yi, what do you even have? You're an absolute waste of space. I nodded, as if I had just realized something. I get it now. The wind of youth, right? Zhang Li probably thought she had won me over, a smug look crossing her face. Sun Yang puffed out his chest, his expression no longer as terrified. The next second, I looked down at Zhang Li. Are you awake now? She instinctively took a step back under my gaze. Sun Yang, still on the ground, was whimpering, his eyes filled with pure terror. I walked up to Sun Yang. Don't you love authenticity? Love freedom? How does it feel now? Do you feel free? Sun Yang was drenched in sweat from the pain, unable to utter a single word. Zhang Li tried to pull me away, but one glare from me sent her reeling back. Weren't you so capable? Why are you silent now? She was trembling, not daring to say a damn thing. Suddenly, I found it utterly boring. With this little courage, trying to seduce a rich heiress. I grabbed the still shaking Zhang Li and headed straight to the west side of the city, to that notorious slum where the dregs of society gather. I dragged Zhang Li out of the car and pinned her against the wall of a filthy alley. The pungent smell of urine and rotting garbage hit us instantly. Zhang Li vomited on the spot. I pointed toward the alley entrance, at a few blonde punks screaming at each other, my voice ice cold. Look, this is the wind of youth you love so much. Is it authentic enough? Is it free enough? If you like it so much, I'll throw you right over there. Zhang Li's face turned pale with terror, clutching my arm for dear life, sobbing uncontrollably. I was wrong, Yifan. Let's go home. I beg you. Just then, I caught a familiar figure out of the corner of my eye. It was Sun Yang, limping away, taking advantage of my distraction, sneaking away through the other end of the alley. I couldn't be bothered to chase him. Trash like him isn't worth another hit. Zhang Li clearly saw him too. The color drained completely from her face. The last shred of her fantasy, shattered along with that fleeing figure, completely destroyed. She stopped crying, just standing there blankly, as if her soul had been ripped out. I shoved her back into the car. She didn't say a word the whole way. When we reached the Zhang residence, she opened the door herself and walked in, completely devastated. I didn't get out. I just told the driver to turn around and head home. That night, I received a message on my phone. Thanks, Yifan. I replied with a "you're welcome" emoji. That settled it. Sure enough, for the next 2 days, things were peaceful at the Jiang house. No one came to cause me trouble. I knew my future sister-in-law, Jiang Shui, must have suppressed it. Looks like my move was the right one. My life as a rich slacker was secure. But the next day, I couldn't smile anymore, because Sun Yang was dead, died in a car accident. It seems my future sister-in-law is even more ruthless than I imagined. Suddenly, I found this family terrifying. Everyone wears an exquisite mask, coldly eliminating every obstacle. My elite brother, Yun, is like that. My future sister-in-law, Jiang Shui, is the same. I'm the only outlier, someone who just wants to eat, sleep, and waste away. I suddenly shuddered, sitting up abruptly in bed. I have to move out immediately. Get away from these monsters right now. I can only keep slacking if I'm alive. Without telling anyone, early the next morning, I went downstairs with a suitcase I'd packed long ago. My mother was sitting in the living room, elegantly sipping morning tea. Seeing me, she barely lifted an eyelid, her voice flat. "Where are you going?" "Changing my sleeping spot." She didn't ask further, lowering her head to continue reading her financial magazine. I have no idea where my so-called father even is. This home is as cold as an ice cellar. I pulled my suitcase and walked out of that lavish villa without looking back. I have a penthouse in the city center I bought a while ago. It's the perfect time to use it. The apartment was huge and empty, and the fridge was completely bare. I drove to the largest supermarket nearby. I needed food and junk food to fill up this new home. Pushing the cart, I navigated through the dazzling aisles. Like a shopping robot, I expressionlessly tossed things into the cart. Just as I turned a corner, I suddenly stopped, because in the corner of the snack section, I saw a girl. She was acting suspiciously, stuffing a bag of bread into her sleeve. She looked a few years younger than me, small in stature, wearing a faded school uniform. She looked quite clean, but unfortunately her hands weren't. I didn't make a sound, just leaning against the shelf, arms crossed, watching her with interest. She was struggling to stuff it in. The sleeve was too small, and the bread was too big. I tried several times. Sweat beaded on my forehead from the anxiety. Finally, she seemed to sense something. Her movement froze. She slowly looked up, our eyes locked. I stared at her in silence. For 10 seconds, her face turned from pale to red right before my eyes. First, there was terror in those big eyes, then panic. Finally, they were filled with an overwhelming sense of shame and humiliation. The hand holding the bread was shaking uncontrollably. Then, with a soft thud, the bread fell to the ground. It was as if all her strength had been drained. She completely slumped, head bowed, wishing she could bury her face in the ground. How boring. I walked over and bent down to pick up the bag of bread, and tossed it into my cart. Then, I grabbed various cookies from the nearby shelf, candies, and swept them all into the cart. Soon, my cart was piled up like a small mountain. I pushed the cart in front of her. She still kept her head down, her whole body tense, as if awaiting judgment. With the tip of my shoe, I nudged her faded canvas shoes. My tone was flat. "No money for food?" Her body shuddered. Then she gave a very slight nod. A second later, as if remembering something, she suddenly shook her head. I grew a bit impatient, nodding and shaking. "Are you performing a mime for me? What the hell is going on?" My tone grew harsher. She trembled in fear, suddenly looking up at me. Her eyes were rimmed with red, brimming with tears. She opened her mouth. A few blurred syllables escaped her throat. Her hands gestured helplessly. In that moment of stunned silence, a thought flashed through my mind. Mute, looking at her anxious and helpless state, that spark of impatience was instantly extinguished. At this moment I felt regret. I felt like an absolute bastard, the kind of thing that would make me slap myself awake in the middle of the night. I didn't say another word. I turned around and grabbed another cart, filling it to the brim with non-perishable food. Then I pushed both carts and signaled her to follow. She didn't seem to react. I couldn't be bothered to explain. I just grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the checkout. After paying, I carried the heavy bags alone. She trailed behind me like a little tail, clutching a few bags of the snacks I'd bought. I stuffed everything into the back of my sports car. Then I told her to get in. She hesitated for a moment, but eventually opened the passenger door and sat inside. I asked for her address. She took the phone. Her small fingers tapped the screen for a long time, finally pinning a location. It was in the old town, a slum I wouldn't even drive past. I said nothing and just started the car. The silence in the car was eerie. She kept her head down, her hands gripping the hem of her clothes tightly. The car navigated through narrow, dilapidated alleys, finally stopping in front of a crumbling tenement building. I turned off the engine and helped her carry the food out of the car. The hallway was dark and damp, filled with the scent of mold and an indescribable stench. She led me up to the third floor, opening a peeling wooden door. A strong smell of traditional Chinese medicine hit me. The room was tiny, so small you could see everything at a glance. The phrase destitute, I finally saw it in the flesh today. On a worn-out wooden bed lay a skeletal elderly person. The elder's eyes were closed, breathing faintly. The girl set down the things in her hands, ran to the bedside, skillfully tucking in the blanket, her eyes full of worry. I think I understood. She didn't just lack money for food. She had no money for her family's medical bills. Stealing bread was likely out of extreme hunger, and a refusal to touch the money for the elder's treatment. Another sob story scenario, the kind of thing I can't stand. After settling her grandmother, the girl walked up to me and gave me a deep bow. Then she picked up a worn-out notebook from the table and quickly wrote something. There was a line of neat handwriting. "Thank you. How much do these things cost? I will definitely pay you back." I looked at the words and almost laughed. Pay me back with what? By stealing again? I didn't say anything. I just took out my phone and called my private assistant. I spoke concisely into the phone. "Get me a VIP room at the City Central Hospital. Send an ambulance to the West City tenements within 15 minutes. I'll send you the address. Charge the expenses to my account." The whole process took less than a minute. The girl was completely stunned. She stared at me, mouth agape, forgetting to cry, forgetting to write. I can understand. Things she would spend a lifetime dreaming of were things I could solve with a single phone call. I nudged the bag by her feet. "What are you staring at? Pack your things. Get ready for the hospital." She snapped out of it and immediately began packing frantically. There wasn't actually much to pack. A few faded old clothes, a chipped enamel cup. The ambulance arrived quickly. Professional paramedics carefully lifted the elder onto the stretcher. From start to finish, the girl gripped the hem of my clothes tightly, as if afraid I would suddenly vanish. I felt a bit uncomfortable, but I didn't push her away. Once at the hospital, everything was perfectly arranged. Full-time caregivers for the VIP room. A team of top specialists immediately began the consultation. I stood outside the pristine ward, watching the busy doctors and nurses inside, and that girl by the bedside, terrified yet grateful. The gloom in my heart caused by Sun Yang's death seemed to lift a little. Money really can buy a good mood. Just then, my hem was gently tugged again. She held up that worn notebook to me. It read, "How can I ever repay your kindness?" Leaning against the doorframe, looking at her, I never said I wanted repayment. She panicked, writing frantically in her notebook. Her handwriting was a bit messy. "No, I can't just take your money for nothing. You're a good person." Seeing those words, good person, the smile on my lips deepened. In this day and age, someone like me is considered a good person? I interrupted her, gesturing. "First of all, I'm no good person. Secondly, like I said, I hate trouble more than anything. You obsessing over this right now is exactly the kind of trouble I'm talking about. Get it?" She looked a bit dazed by my twisted logic, staring at me blankly, not knowing how to respond. Looking at her like that, I sighed, walked up to her, and without another word, took the notebook and pen from her hand, and began scribbling away. Once finished, I shoved the notebook back into her hand. "Consider this me buying insurance in advance. Study hard and get into a good university. If I ever fall on hard times one day and end up begging on the streets, just remember to give me a bowl of rice." She stared at the words in the notebook, stunned for a long, long time. Then she looked up, and those eyes, clear as mountain spring water, finally overflowed with tears. She didn't make a sound, just letting the tears fall silently, each drop staining the worn-out notebook. I awkwardly looked away. "All right, stop crying. Your grandmother still needs you to take care of her. You look pathetic sobbing like this. Which school do you go to? I'll have old Wang pay your tuition. I'll also have him send you 5,000 a month for living expenses until you graduate college and find a job. Don't tell me you don't want it. It's part of the insurance." Having said that, I couldn't be bothered with this emotional scene. I gave the doctor a few brief instructions, turned around and left. Driving down the wide-open road, I suddenly found it quite funny. I, the prestigious second young master of the Yi family, could I ever actually fall?
Absolutely impossible.
Well, let's just say I'm spending money to earn some karma. After all, the people around me are more ruthless than the next. I need to build up plenty of good karma to ensure that a loafer like me can live in luxury for the rest of my life. And then I spent 5 years in ruin. Just 5 years. My elite older brother, Yun, who acted so sophisticated after he got married. When this mess broke out, I was sunbathing on a private island. I almost laughed when I got the call. Just as I expected, my brother was a spineless coward at heart, yet he loved pretending to be the devoted romantic. I couldn't even be bothered to go back and watch the farce. Anyway, wealthy marriages always end up the same way, until my bank cards were frozen one by one. All the properties, stocks, and funds in my name changed hands overnight. Only then did I realize something was seriously wrong. By the time I rushed back from the island, everything had already been settled. The Yi Group had been renamed the Jiang Group. My father was indicted on multiple economic charges. The evidence was ironclad. He'd likely spend the rest of his life rotting in prison. My brother, Yun, was kicked out with nothing. And I, a useless waste who just wanted to coast through life, wasn't spared either. The secret stash I'd painstakingly saved for over 20 years was completely gone. I stood at the door of my penthouse, staring at the two expressionless bodyguards in black suits blocking my way. My head was spinning. Look, lady, if you want revenge, go ahead. I wouldn't even care if you killed my brainless brother. But throwing my dad in jail and gutting the Yi Group? What's the deal with that? Thinking about it, I was absolutely livid. Am I living in some revenge plot where I'm just the collateral damage relative swept away in the process? Just then, the door opened. Jiang Shui was sitting on my favorite Italian sofa, elegantly swirling a wine glass. 5 years had passed. She was more beautiful than before, and colder. That overpowering aura of total control was suffocating. When she saw me, she set down the glass and gave me a gentle smile.
Yefan.
You're back. I didn't say a word, just stared at her. She stood up, walked toward me step by step, and reached out to touch my face. Don't look at me like that. I didn't want this either. I tilted my head to dodge her. She wasn't bothered. She withdrew her hand and spoke calmly. Your brother was too stupid. I gave him a chance. But unfortunately, he didn't cherish it. Jiang Shui shook her head, her expression turning playful as she looked at me. So, this is your reason for wiping out my entire family? She paused, her voice laced with a hint of seduction. However, things are different now. He wronged me first. My revenge is perfectly justified. Now, I don't need a husband. As she spoke, she took a step closer to me with an intense aggressiveness. Xiaofan, are you interested in staying to keep me company? Can take care of you just like before. After hearing that, I laughed until tears almost came to my eyes. I wiped the corner of my eye, looking at Jiang Shui's flawless face. Hearing you say that, I'm starting to wonder if you're the one who personally orchestrated this. The smile on her face finally stiffened. Though it was only for a split second, I still caught it. The last shred of hope in my heart vanished. As expected, this woman has been a lunatic from the start. To achieve her goals, she'll stop at nothing. I dropped the smile, looking at her expressionlessly. Then I slowly gave her the middle finger. The last trace of a smile vanished from her face, replaced by a cold indifference.
Ungrateful brat.
She waved her hand, without giving me another glance. 2 bodyguards stepped forward immediately, one on each side, hoisting me up like a little chick. I was violently shoved out of my own home. Standing in the empty corridor, I couldn't help but scoff. If I had actually believed her lies, and stayed until she got bored of me, I probably wouldn't even know how I died. I knew very well that I was no match for her. Even my father, that old fox, was played by her. Someone like me who only knew how to party, how could I possibly compete with her? Stay far away from this crazy woman. Staying alive is more important than anything. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and found those friends who always called me Brother Yu. I dialed the first number. Hello, young Master Zhou. It's Yifan. 3 seconds of silence on the other end. Then cautiously, who is this? Sorry, You have the wrong number. The call was cut off. I froze for a moment, then gave a self-deprecating smile. I dialed the second one. The result was exactly the same. The third, the fourth. Either wrong number or simply no answer. I leaned against the cold wall and deleted every single one of those so-called friends, one by one. By the end, only a few lonely family numbers remained on the screen. I sold everything of value I had. It all added up to less than 100,000 yuan. This amount of money, in the past, it wouldn't even cover one night of drinking. Now it's everything I own. I wandered aimlessly through the streets and unconsciously ended up back under my apartment building. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. If all else fails, I'll just find a factory to turn screws. Low requirements and free room and board. Anyway, these 20+ years of luxury. I've had enough of it. With my head down, I walked and planned my next move when I suddenly bumped into a soft embrace. A faint, fresh fragrance drifted over. I instinctively wanted to apologize, but as I looked up, I locked eyes with a pair of clear, bright eyes. It was a girl with delicate features. She looked familiar, but I couldn't recall where I'd seen her. But she clearly recognized me. I could see it clearly. The moment she recognized me, an indescribable joy and relief surged in her eyes. She opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but then, as if realizing something, she simply reached into her pocket and hurriedly pulled out a phone. She typed rapidly on the screen. The screen read, "Mr. Yi, do you remember me?" I looked at those words, Mr. Yi. Not many people call me that these days. I studied her face carefully, and fragments of memory began to piece together. Suddenly, it hit me. I was slightly surprised. That trembling figure in the supermarket 5 years ago. The girl taking care of her grandmother in that dilapidated shack. It's you. Her eyes lit up instantly, nodding vigorously. That joy almost overflowed from her clear eyes. I became even more confused. "Why are you here?" She typed rapidly again, and held the phone in front of me. The screen read, "I saw the news about the Jiang family. I was very worried about you. I thought you might come back here to visit." Since yesterday, my heart felt as if it had been struck, which meant, during the 24 hours since I was kicked out, she had been right here under the apartment building I can no longer enter, using the clumsiest way possible, guarding an uncertain possibility. A surreal and complex emotion surged within me. While my so-called friends were busy distancing themselves from me, a little girl I had almost forgotten had waited for me here for a whole day and night. I quirked my lips, wanting to say something. She seemed to notice my embarrassment. The phone screen read, "Do you have nowhere to go?" My silence served as a yes. She put away her phone, and then did something I completely unexpected. She reached out and gently tugged at the sleeve of my hoodie. Her grip was weak. I could have easily broken free, but that feeling coming from my sleeve, that tiny sliver of pleading strength, was like an invisible chain, leaving me unable to move. She led me away, turning toward the street corner. For some reason, I didn't resist. I simply followed behind her. We arrived at a small bakery glowing with warm light. The shop was called Glimmer Bakery. The door was already closed, but the lights in the window were still on. She unlocked the door with a key, then looked back and motioned for me to enter. The shop wasn't large, but it was clean and tidy. The air was filled with the scent of cream and wheat. From under the counter, she took out a carefully laminated folder. She pulled out a yellowed piece of paper and pushed it toward me. It was the insurance clause I had scribbled in a wild hand 5 years ago. "In case I ever fall on hard times and end up begging on the streets, just remember to give me a bowl of food." She pointed to the words, then pointed to me, and then to herself and the shop. That look in her eyes, "One bowl will be enough." She was as serious as if she were fulfilling a sacred contract. Finally, she turned around. From the oven, she took out a still warm croissant and handed it to me. "No pity, no sympathy, only a sense of it's your turn." As if it were only natural. I took the bread, took a bite. The taste, it's nothing compared to the gourmet meals I used to have, but it brings a sense of peace. "Do you still have any openings?" The girl froze for a moment, and then a brilliant smile bloomed across her face. She nodded vigorously. That day, the chaotic first half of my life ended, and the second half of my life, with this little shop called Glimmer, became tightly entwined. And my boss was someone I once thought I would never cross paths with again. a little mute girl. The girl's name is Shen Youwei. Using the money I gave her and her own savings, after graduating from college, she opened this bakery on this very street. The shop isn't large, but business is good. The neighbors seem to take special care of her, often going out of their way to buy a few loaves of bread and exchange a few words of gossip. That poor girl, she's had it rough, but now it's great. She's got a helper. He looks reliable, wearing an apron with a little bear on it. I clumsily packed the freshly baked toast. Hearing those words, I didn't feel much. Reliable? I'm a useless wreck who can't do a thing right. Where on earth do they see reliability in me? However, my arrival did indeed lighten her load. At least the heavy lifting, like mixing flour and hauling sugar bags, didn't require a petite girl like her to grit her teeth and struggle through. When the shop closed for the night, we would return to our tiny home upstairs. For bare walls, that phrase described her previous place. But this place is more like one bare wall. One dining table, 2 chairs, 1 sofa, and a tiny room partitioned off from the balcony. That was my bedroom. It was smaller than the bathroom in my old villa, but I slept more soundly than any night in the past 20 years.
No schemes, no hypocrisy.
In the air, there was only the faint scent of wheat drifting up from downstairs. I started learning how to be a normal person, learning how to sweep without leaving ash everywhere, learning how to use a pressure cooker for porridge without blowing up the kitchen. Most of the time, the results were catastrophic. I mistook salt for sugar and made a pot of salty red bean paste. Her little face scrunched up, but she didn't spit it out. She just silently drank a large glass of water, then picked up a pen and wrote in her notebook, "The taste is very unique. Next time, maybe use a little less sugar." Looking at her earnest expression, I was both annoyed and amused. I snatched the bowl away and dumped it in the trash. From then on, I started learning sign language. I bought a pile of textbooks, and every night after she fell asleep, in my little partitioned room, facing the phone screen, I practiced over and over again. From the simplest hello, thank you, to you worked hard today and good night. When I used those slightly awkward gestures for the first time, to tell her, good morning, she froze. Then, in those eyes that were always so calm, it was as if a star had suddenly fallen in, blindingly bright. She raised her hand and responded with utmost sincerity. I felt that in the past 20 years, there wasn't a single moment where I felt that doing something was so worthwhile. Days passed by just like that, and things gradually got better. I went from an idiot who didn't even know how to use an oven, to a baking apprentice who could skillfully whip cream and decorate cakes. Business at the shop grew better and better. We even took over the shop next door to expand our space. In my bank account, there was once again a sum that wasn't huge, but enough for me to move out and rent my own place. Several times I wanted to mention this to Shen Youwei, but the words reached my lips only to be swallowed back down. Where would I live if I moved out? What would I eat? Being alone is so boring. Besides, it's not easy for a young girl on her own. I can lend a hand, right? I made up several excuses in my head, and then comfortably continued to linger here. Shen Youwei never mentioned it either. She seemed to simply accept my presence. I don't believe in love. My father and my brother are the best examples of why not. But this stability of being with Shen Youwei became an addiction for me. I shook my head, casting those messy thoughts out of my mind. It was almost noon. Time to prepare lunch for her. I was just taking off my apron, preparing to go upstairs, but at that moment, a familiar figure pushed open the shop door and walked in. The newcomer wore a perfectly tailored suit, her makeup exquisite, her hair tied up meticulously. Every inch of her radiated the aura of a successful elite. It was Chu Qiuzi. 5 years had passed, and the humility and distress born of poverty had been washed away completely. She was no longer that girl in a faded school uniform, the iceberg school beauty begging me for help. Now she was exquisite and perfect. Behind her followed a young man, looking to be in his early 20s, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, like a college student fresh out of school. The look in her eyes was filled with undisguised hostility. Probably a male assistant. Chu Qiuzi's gaze lingered on the teddy bear apron I was wearing. For a brief moment, her brow furrowing almost imperceptibly, but she quickly returned to that poised smile.
Ye fan.
Long time no see. I nodded, as a way of greeting her. I didn't stop untying my apron. She seemed to want to ask something, but then thought it inappropriate. Finally, she took a check from her bag and pushed it toward me. I glanced at the number on the check, picked it up, and stuffed it in my pocket. Thanks. This is what I'm owed. Though I never actually expected to get it back. The male assistant behind her, seeing how readily I took the money, felt his contempt deepen. His gaze swept across our tiny little bakery. Finally, it landed on my face. That look in her eyes, a look I knew all too well, filled with condescending pity. Xiaofan, I heard about what happened with your family. If you don't have anywhere to go right now, you can come to my company. My husband and I just started the business. We're looking for people right now. Looking at her forced act of compassion made my stomach churn. That deal back then was my investment. She's just paying back the debt. Neither of us owes the other. Now she's putting on this act, trying to turn her former creditor into a charity case. I looked at the man beside her, the male assistant whose gaze was growing increasingly hostile. Suddenly, I understood. She's enjoying the thrill of saving someone, just like how I once enjoyed her desperation. Now she's enjoying my downfall, only she's far more hypocritical than I was. She even wraps herself in a cloak of kindness. I rejected her coldly. No need. I'm doing just fine here. The smile on Chu Chotzi's face froze. Xiaofan, don't be stubborn. I know how you've been living. I cut her off, my voice laced with impatience. I said, no need. She finally stopped insisting. A hint of displeasure surfaced on her beautiful face. Fine. Since you've decided, I won't force you. The moment she turned around, the male assistant behind her immediately stepped forward. He reached out thoughtfully and lightly touched her arm. Chu Chotzi naturally turned her head towards him and gave a smile that only the two of them understood. Now's the time. I casually picked up my phone. Without making a sound, I pressed the shutter. The angle was perfect. In the photo, the assistant's hand was practically on her waist, and the smile on her face. Anyone who saw it wouldn't think that it was just an expression for a regular subordinate. I waved my phone and waved goodbye to them. Then it took me 2.5 minutes to find her husband's public email online. Then I sent the photo anonymously. Once that was done, I deleted the photo and the sent history. I felt much better. After a quiet lunch with Shen Youwei, my mind finally settled. Leaning against the counter, I thought about how to spend this 1 million. The numbers were so clear they were almost blinding. How long has it been since I've seen this much money? At least our lives don't have to be so tight anymore. And there's the new equipment Shen Youwei has been longing for. The more I thought about it, the happier I became. I've never felt 1 million was so useful. Just then, the wind chime at the door jingled. A crisp yet feigned fragile voice interrupted my daydreaming. Xiaofan. I turned around and saw Zhongli, quite a few old acquaintances visiting today. If I remember correctly, her unlucky husband,
Yang Yonghao,
has been dead for less than 2 years, right? Is something the matter? I leaned on the counter with a blank expression. She bit her lip. Her eyes were shimmering. That hesitant look of hers made me feel nauseous. Zhang Li's voice sounded aggrieved. I wanted to see you. Second Miss Zhang. What act are you putting on now? I almost burst out laughing. Her eyes immediately turned red, as if she had suffered the greatest injustice.
Ye fan.
I know I was foolish before. I did many things wrong. I always thought that I loved that kind of passionate, sweeping romance. But only now do I realize what I truly wanted was simply a stable home. Her tone was sincere. Her gaze was full of affection. She looked up. Those watery eyes stared straight at me, filled with longing and memories.
Ye fan.
Let's start over. I know your current situation. My sister really went too far, but it's okay. I can support you. Her tone carried a hint of pity and condescension. Oh please, still playing the prodigal daughter returns card. But make no mistake, when did we ever even start? I barely suppressed the urge to roll my eyes. My mind drifted back a few years. Her wedding to that former poor student Yang Yonghao was grand and touching. At the wedding, she cried and said that he was the light of her life, the happiness she would grasp at any cost. I was standing below the stage back then, watching that fool who was completely moved to tears. Only one thought crossed my mind. This guy is doomed. Sure enough, less than 2 years after the wedding, Zhang Li got bored. When the passion faded and marriage returned to the mundane grind, she naturally grew weary of it. Then a perfectly timed green tea man appeared. Luckily, that poor kid wasn't a complete coward. He held evidence against Zhang Li, wanting to fight for his dignity. Then he kicked the bucket. There's no such thing as a coincidence in this world. Behind all this, it was likely the handiwork of my former sister-in-law, Jiang Shui. Snapping back to the present, I looked at the woman in front of me, Zhang Li, still acting out her scene of deep affection. The smile on my lips widened.
Jiang Li.
Do you think every man is a fool? The expression on her face froze. I spoke slowly. Your husband's funeral was quite a lavish affair. I saw it in the news. You cried your heart out. Truly heartbreaking for those who heard, and tear-jerking for those who saw. Too bad, though. If only on that night I hadn't seen someone who looked exactly like you at the hotel entrance, walking into the elevator on the arm of a handsome guy. The color instantly drained from Zhang Li's face. Oh right, that handsome guy didn't stay happy for long. He jumped off a building too.
Jiang Li.
Aren't you tired? I took a step forward, staring straight into her trembling pupils. Wearing a mask and acting every single day. Doesn't that make you feel sick? I pushed her back step by step until she finally slammed into the doorframe, trembling like a leaf in the autumn wind. You're lying, she retorted, acting tough but terrified inside. But her voice was thin, like a leaking draft. I couldn't be bothered to waste more words on her. I wasn't worried about her seeking revenge. A woman so obsessed with playing the saint would never allow herself to lose her composure or lash out in a fit of rage. Her persona was more important than her own life. She had worn that mask for so long that it had stuck to her face, impossible to peel off. Just leave. As if she had been granted a pardon, she stumbled and ran out. Her retreating figure was a pathetic sight. Silence finally returned to the shop. I let out a long, deep sigh, feeling as if I'd exhaled 5 years of accumulated misery. Faint footsteps echoed from the stairs. Shen Youwei walked down, carrying a bowl of freshly made dessert. She stepped up to me, handed me the bowl, her eyes asking what had happened. I shook my head, signaling that everything was fine. Shen Youwei signed, her expression filled with worry. But you don't look happy. I looked into her clear, innocent eyes, and smiled. Without putting the bowl down, I signed back in my somewhat clumsy way. I'm doing great. She understood, and a sweet smile bloomed on her face. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling upon us, warm and cozy. After that day, I stopped paying attention to the social circles. I cut all ties with them completely. Now, I only want to live a good life with Shen Youwei, running this little shop, living a quiet, peaceful life. Every morning at 5 a.m., I wake up half an hour before her to start the fermentation for the first batch of bread downstairs. By the time she comes downstairs, still sleepy-eyed, the aroma of wheat is already wafting through the kitchen, and the hot water is ready. She always signs good morning to me first, then skillfully ties her apron, and begins preparing today's desserts. We rarely spoke, but our coordination grew more seamless. Sometimes when things got hectic, and she'd be sweating from the rush, I would hand her a glass of ice water. As she took the glass, her fingers would occasionally brush against the back of my hand, cool and soft. I began to notice all her little habits, and she stopped cautiously guessing my thoughts. Our days were fulfilling. Since we started running the shop together, she'd teach me how to make more complex desserts at night. Sometimes we spent the whole night without needing a pen, yet we could have a complete conversation. This unspoken understanding gave me peace. I began to seriously consider one thing. I wanted to marry her. I didn't believe in love, but I started to believe that some people are just born to be together. I simply wanted to stay like this with her forever. 3 months later, I confessed my feelings to her. To be precise, I proposed. It was her birthday. Without her knowing, I prepared a little surprise in the shop. When she came downstairs that evening, the entire shop was lit up with candles. She stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, covering her mouth. I walked up to her, dropped to one knee, and pulled out a diamond ring. I didn't know how to say those sweet things, nor did I believe in eternal vows. "Will you marry me?" she cried, tears falling like broken pearls, dropping one by one onto the floor. She nodded vigorously, then reached out her hand for me to slide on the ring. The ring was a bit too large, her hand was too slender, but she clenched her fist tightly, refusing to let it slip off. I held her close, smelling the faint scent of her hair. In that moment I suddenly felt that the first 20 years of my life were all just preparation for meeting her. Our wedding was very simple. It wasn't a large affair, inviting only neighbors, and a few classmates I was still on good terms with, and friends. I wasn't looking for any grand display, I just wanted to give Shen Youwei a decent wedding. The day before the wedding, I went to the barber to get cleaned up, and bought myself a decent suit. We picked out Shen Youwei's wedding dress. Together, when she tried it on, she seemed to be glowing. Standing outside the dressing room, looking at her in the mirror, I suddenly felt it was all a dream. This girl, as beautiful as an angel, was actually going to marry me. On the wedding day, everything went smoothly. Shen Youwei's grandmother had recovered a lot. She came to our wedding in a wheelchair. The old lady took my hand, saying in a frail voice, "Thank you for taking care of our Youwei." I felt a bit bashful. "Is she who takes care of me?" During the exchange of rings, Shen Youwei's hand was trembling. I held her hand and whispered in her ear, "Don't be nervous, it's just a formality." She let out a little giggle, and the tension vanished instantly. "Mr. Yifan, do you take Miss Shen Youwei to be your wife, in poverty or in wealth, and protect her?" "I do." "Miss Shen Youwei, do you take Mr. Yifan to be your husband, in poverty or in wealth, in sickness or in health, to love and respect him?" Shen Youwei couldn't speak, but she nodded vigorously, then signed her answer. The officiant was momentarily stunned. Not knowing what to do, I smiled and translated for her, "She does." Thunderous applause erupted from the crowd. During the kiss, she was a bit shy, her face turning red as an apple. I kissed her lips gently, very, very softly, as if I were afraid of hurting her. Then, I leaned into her ear and whispered, "Mrs. Yi, please take care of me from now on." She laughed in my arms, her shoulders shaking. Classmates came forward one by one to toast and congratulate us. A former roommate I used to be close with said, "You've changed. You used to act like you didn't care about anything. Now you look like a normal person." I glanced over at Shen Youwei, who was communicating with Grandma, and smiled. Maybe it's because she finally has someone worth caring about. After the wedding, we returned to our home upstairs. Everything was just as it had been, except there were more flowers and gifts from the wedding. Shen Youwei took off her wedding dress and changed into her usual loungewear. She was in the kitchen making a late-night snack for me. I stood at the kitchen door, watching her busy figure. Suddenly, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This is the life I've always wanted. Just two people living a simple life. She walked over with the snack, saw me zoning out, and waved her hand in front of my face. "What are you thinking about?" "Thinking about you." Her face blushed again. She gave me a playful, reproachful slap. Then, she wrote in her notebook,
Yifan,
"We're married now. Do you regret it?" I shook my head.
no regrets.
"How about you?" "No regrets either. It just feels a bit surreal, like a dream." I reached out and pinched her cheek. "Does it hurt?" She covered her cheek and glared at me, then wrote in her notebook, "This isn't a dream, and I love you." When Shen Youwei wrote those 3 words, her fingers trembled slightly. Under the dim yellow light, her eyelashes looked like butterfly wings dampened by rain. I stared at those words, and my heart felt like it had been struck hard. Not the racing heart of a school beauty's confession in youth, nor the vain satisfaction of spending a fortune, but a subtle, heavy ache, wrapped in an unprecedented sense of security. I took the pen from her hand, closed the notebook, and intentionally put on a stern face. "Mrs. Yi, writing this late at night, are you trying to keep me awake?" She waved her hands frantically, her face flushing deep red, gesturing clumsily. "It's true." At that moment, I sighed and pulled her into my arms. My chin rested on the top of her soft hair. The person in my arms grew quiet, her breath softly brushing against my neck. In that instant, I suddenly felt that the Jiang family's wealth, or Jiang Shui and Chu Qiuzi, everything I have now, is worth more than the last 20 years combined. But fate is a cruel thing. It always chooses the moment you feel happiest to trip you up. Life after marriage was like bread rising in an oven, warm and fulfilling, We woke up at 4 a.m. to knead the dough. At 6, the first batch of croissants came out, filling the house with fragrance. Shen Youwei taught me how to frost cakes. I was clumsy and always made a mess of the cream. She didn't get annoyed, but held my hand to correct me bit by bit. In the afternoons, when customers were few, she would nap on the counter. Sunlight filtered through the glass window, casting dappled light across her face. I often gazed at her sleeping face, mesmerized. How could this girl be so pure? As if she had never been tainted by this muddy world. But the mud always splashes back. One rainy night, just as the shop was about to close, a few drunken men burst through the glass door. Leading them was a local thug, called Brother Chong. He had once come to collect protection money, but I chased him out with a broom. Now, reeking of alcohol, he kicked over the plants at the door, his tone arrogant. "Mute girl. Get out here." Shen Youwei was counting the accounts. She was startled by the sound and instinctively looked at me. I pushed her behind me and grabbed the rolling pin to deal with them. Brother Chong grinned, revealing a mouth of yellow teeth. "Young Master Yi, you really think you're someone important? Huh? I heard you married a mute. We've come to have a celebratory drink." Ha ha ha. The thugs behind him jeered, their eyes lingering on Shen Youwei. It was sickening. I gripped the rolling pin tight, my knuckles turning white. "Get out." "Oh, protecting her quite closely, aren't we?" As he spoke, he took a step closer, his alcoholic breath spraying in my face. "This shop of yours, you don't want to keep it open anymore?" Suddenly, Shen Youwei stepped out from behind me, holding a box of freshly baked cookies. She forced a smile, gesturing to them. She was offering them some. In that moment, my heart felt like it was being pierced by a needle. This fool always thinks kindness can dissolve malice. Brother Chong swiped the box away. "Who wants this crap?" The cookies shattered across the floor. He reached out to grab Shen Youwei's wrist. I completely snapped. I swung the rolling pin with everything I had. In the chaos, I don't know how many hits I took. I only remember shielding Shen Youwei tightly in the corner of the counter. Sirens wailed, growing louder. The thugs scattered in a panic. Shen Youwei's trembling hand touched the blood at the corner of my mouth. Tears streamed down her face in large drops, yet she couldn't make a single sound. I wiped my face and forced a smile. "What are you crying for? Your man isn't dead yet." She cried even harder, curling up in my arms, like a frightened little animal. That night, she clung to my arm as she slept. She would wake up startled at the slightest movement, looking at the dark circles under her eyes. A wave of terror from the violence surged in my heart. What if I hadn't been able to protect her today? The next day, I bought a solid steel rod at a flea market and placed it under the counter. When Shen Youwei saw it, she shook her head vigorously. I tapped the steel rod, gesturing that it was for self-defense. "It's best if we don't have to use it." She lowered her eyes and wrote in her notebook, "I'm afraid you'll get hurt, but I'm even more afraid that you'll get hurt. I'm so afraid you'll get hurt." I rubbed her hair. "Shen Youwei, you're all I have left now." She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears. Finally, she nodded gently. The peaceful days didn't last long. Zhang Li reappeared, haunting me like a ghost. This time, she didn't come inside. Instead, she drove a flashy red sports car, parked by the roadside, sunglasses covering half her face, beckoning me with her finger. I was breaking apart flour sacks, too lazy to deal with her. She just got out and leaned against the car door, laughing. "Does your wife know how you helped Chu Chiotzi?" Her tone was provocative. My hand slipped. The flour bag slammed onto the ground, raising a cloud of white dust. Hearing the noise, Shen Youwei ran out of the shop, looking at us in confusion. Zhang Li took off her sunglasses. Her gaze swept over Shen Youwei with undisguised pity. "How pathetic, following a loser like you who can't even afford a decent wedding." I clenched my fists, veins throbbing in my temples. "Shut up, Zhang Li. Haha. What's this? Scared? You weren't like this back then. When the school beauty begged you, didn't you enjoy the thrill of playing the savior? Why act all devoted and loving now?" Shen Youwei didn't understand Zhang Li's words, but she could feel the tension in the air. She gently tugged at my sleeve, her eyes filled with worry. I took a deep breath, suppressing my rage, turning to gesture to Shen Youwei. "Go inside first." Shen Youwei hesitated, staying put. Suddenly, Zhang Li played a recording on speaker. It was Chu Chiotzi's voice from back then, in the woods, her voice trembling with tears. "I'm willing to give you my heart, everything I have, As long as you agree to one thing, I am no philanthropist. Shen Youwei's face instantly turned pale. She looked at me, then at Zhang Li. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't make a sound. Zhang Li put away her phone, satisfied. Little sister, you think he's some kind of good man? He helped Chu Qiuzi, only to enjoy watching others suffer. You're talking nonsense. Maybe helping her was just a momentary whim. I completely lost control. I rushed forward to grab the phone. Zhang Li screamed and dove into her car. Locking the doors, the sports car sped away, leaving only Shen Youwei and me standing in a cloud of flour. She lowered her head, her shoulders shaking slightly. I wanted to touch her, but she instinctively took a step back. That one step felt like a knife to my heart. After closing for the night, the atmosphere in the attic was oppressive. Shen Youwei had her back to me, tidying the bed, refusing to look at me. I turned her by the shoulders, forcing her to face me. Do you believe her? Shen Youwei bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. Writing in her notebook, is what she said true? But not exactly. I wiped my face. I told her everything about how I rejected Chu Qiuzi, how the contract was made. I explained it all from start to finish. Shen Youwei, I admit I'm not a good person, but with you, I never thought of it as charity. She remained silent for a long time, so long that I thought she would never speak to me again. Finally, she raised her hand, slowly gesturing.
I'm scared.
Scared of what? I'm afraid that one day you'll find me boring, and you'll leave me. Her fingers were trembling. I have nothing. Only you. My heart clenched. I pulled her tightly into my arms. Silly girl. It's me who only has you. That night, we slept in each other's arms, like two wounded animals, licking each other's wounds. But Zhang Li's words were like a thorn, piercing Shen Youwei's heart. She became sensitive. If I came home 10 minutes late, she would become restless. If a female customer chatted with me for a bit longer, she would silently walk away. I noticed it, but I didn't know how to fix it, until one night I woke up and found the space beside me empty. Shen Youwei was curled up in the corner of the balcony, weeping silently under the moonlight.
He walked over
and hugged her from behind. Her body stiffened. Then she softened, burying her face in my chest. Shen Youwei, let me tell you a story. I told her about my parents, about my brother and Jiang Shui, about the rot beneath the glamorous facade of that home. I didn't believe in love before. I thought it was all just a trade of interests. But you're different. You make me feel that being alive can still have some humanity. Under the moonlight, her eyes were like black obsidian soaked in water. She reached out, tracing my eyebrows, eyes, and the bridge of my nose, finally stopping at my lips. Then she leaned in and kissed me so softly. It was a pure kiss, devoid of any lust, like the first snow falling on a palm. I froze. Then I responded. Something quietly melted in that kiss. The thorn Zhang Li had planted was silently pulled out. Life returned to peace, but danger always lurks in the shadows. One afternoon, an unwelcome guest arrived at the shop. Jiang Shui. 5 years had passed. She looked more imposing, wearing a custom-made suit, completely out of place in this humble bakery. She didn't bring bodyguards. She was alone. When her gaze fell upon Shen Youwei, carried a cold, scrutinizing chill. So this is the life you chose. Huddled in a place like this, playing house with a mute. I shielded Shen Youwei behind me. Get to the point. As she spoke, she helped herself to a chair and sat down.
Ye Fan, Ye Feng.
You're still as naive as ever. Shen Youwei suddenly gripped my arm tightly. Jiang Shui slowly opened her handbag and pushed over a yellowed photograph. In the photo was a young couple. The man's features bore a resemblance to Shen Youwei. The woman was holding a baby. Your grandmother didn't tell you, did she? Your parents didn't die of illness. It was a car accident. The person who killed them was named Yitao. Yitao was your father. Drunk driving, huh? The air froze instantly. My head started ringing. I could barely stand. Shen Youwei stared intensely at the photo. Her face turned pale as a sheet. An accident, was it? Jiang Shui stood up, looking down on us with disdain.
Ye Fan.
Your father killed her parents, and now you pretend to be devoted just to marry her. How ironic. Shut up. I roared, but my voice trembled violently. Jiang Shui leaned in close to Shen Youwei's ear, whispering softly, "Little sister, do you think he's only kind to you because of guilt?" With that, she turned and left, as if she had never been there, leaving behind a hellish silence. Shen Youwei didn't move an inch, as if her soul had been ripped away. I reached out to touch her, but she recoiled as if electrocuted. Her eyes were hollow and strange. Shen Youwei, let me explain. I didn't know. Shen Youwei suddenly pushed me away, rushed upstairs and slammed the attic door shut. I chased after her, pounding on the door. There was no response from inside. After a while, a piece of paper was slid under the door. On it were a few trembling words. "Leave me alone." I sat outside that door until dawn. There was no sound from the room, but I knew she wasn't sleeping either. The next day, Shen Youwei didn't come down to open the shop. I cooked some porridge and took it up, only to find the door still locked. The third day, the fourth day, it was the same. She locked herself in the room, neither eating nor drinking. The bomb Jiang Shui had left behind almost completely destroyed the tiny world we had just barely managed to build. During those days, Shen Youwei locked herself in the attic. I was like a trapped beast, pacing back and forth in the small shop. Bags of flour lay scattered on the floor. Burnt cookies from days ago remained on the baking tray. The air was filled with the sour smell of desperate fermentation. Countless times I wanted to rush up and smash through that thin door, but every time I saw under the door gap, the notes she slid through, with handwriting becoming more erratic. My outstretched hand would drop helplessly. I feared that my approach would be the final straw that broke her. This feeling of helplessness was deeper than when my family collapsed years ago. Back then, at least I could be angry. I could curse. I could just pack my bags and leave. But now, I don't even have the right to be angry. The blood of the perpetrator flows through my veins. Jiang Shui had precisely found my weakest defense. One hit and I collapsed. Late on the fifth night, a suppressed sound came from the attic. A sob, like the whimpering of a small animal, followed by the dull thud of something heavy falling. My heart stopped. I didn't care about anything else. I burst through the door with the spare key. Shen Youwei was collapsed by the bedside. Her face was ashen gray. Her lips were cracked. A knocked-over water glass lay beside her. She seemed to want water, but she didn't even have the strength for that. Days without food or water. Her body had reached its limit. I rushed over and picked her up. She was as light as a feather, as if she could vanish at any moment. I patted her cheek. "Shen Youwei." My voice was trembling uncontrollably. Her eyelids flickered, slowly opening a tiny slit. Her hollow gaze landed on my face, without focus. At that moment, I truly feared she would just leave like this. Feared I wouldn't even have a chance for atonement. I rushed downstairs like a madman. I heated the porridge and mixed it with warm water, prying open her lips little by little, carefully feeding her with a small spoon. She swallowed mechanically, her gaze still vacant. After half a bowl of porridge, I brought some hot water, using a towel to gently wipe her haggard face and her ice-cold hands and feet. Throughout the whole process, she was like a doll, letting me move her as I pleased. Only the occasional tear sliding down her cheek proved that she was still alive. I tucked her back into the blankets and lay down beside her, fully clothed, holding her tightly through the quilt. I didn't dare to sleep, fearing she would vanish the moment I closed my eyes. "Shen Youwei," I whispered in her ear, my voice incredibly hoarse. "I know you can hear me, you can hate me, you can blame me, anything is fine, but you cannot die. If you die, what will I do? I, Yifan, have lived for over 20 years. I've done plenty of bastard things, but I never intended to hurt anyone. I accept the sins my father committed. If you feel better by hating me, then hate me." As I spoke, I took her hand and pressed it to my chest. "But you can't punish me this way, or punish yourself. Your grandmother fought so hard to raise you, not for you to end it like this. Do you remember that croissant you gave me? It was the most bitter yet sweetest thing I've ever tasted. Bitter because I was destitute, sweet because of you. This shop is called Glimmer. You are the one who lit it. If you're gone, this light will go out, and my world will truly be pitch black." I don't know how long I spoke, until my throat was dry and aching. The body in my arms was still cold, but her breathing seemed to have stabilized. At dawn the next day, I prepared to get up and make her something to eat, but my sleeve was gently caught by a cold hand. I whipped around and met her eyes. Though they were still red and swollen, there was a faint glimmer of light in those eyes. She looked at me. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but her lips vaguely formed the word water. I practically scrambled to pour some water. My hands shook, spilling half of it. After helping her take a few sips, she leaned into my arms and closed her eyes. Another tear slid down her cheek, but this this time it wasn't the silence of despair, but a fragile, exhausted vulnerability. She was allowing me to be near her. This realization almost brought me to tears of joy. The days that followed were a slow and arduous recovery. Shen Youwei's body gradually recovered, but the wounds in her heart were far from healed. She became exceptionally quiet, even more silent than before. She still helped me manage the shop, but her movements were sluggish, often staring blankly at the plates on the counter. She still wakes up in a panic at night, drenched in cold sweat. As I hold her, I can feel her heart racing wildly. She stopped using the notebook to communicate with me. When she occasionally needs to express herself, it's only through simple gestures. I know that thorn is still embedded deep in her heart. Jiang Shui's words were like venom, eroding all her trust in the love between us. She began to subconsciously avoid my touch. When I put food on her plate, she would freeze for a moment before accepting it. When I try to hold her at night, she stiffly turns away from me. This deliberate distance is more suffocating than any argument. I know she's struggling, reevaluating everything between us. My help, my proposal, whether my love all stems from a belated guilt of a son paying for his father's debts. The turning point came one afternoon. An old lady who often bought whole wheat bread tremblingly handed us a thick envelope, saying it was specialty cookies sent by her son from abroad, insisting on thanking us for taking care of her. Shen Youwei couldn't refuse and accepted them. Dear, you and your man are both good people. These days, few do business with such honesty. You two must take good care of each other. The old lady rambled, holding Shen Youwei's hand. After the old lady left, Shen Youwei stood behind the counter with the cookies for a long time. Sunlight streamed through the window onto her lowered lashes. I watched from a distance, not daring to disturb her. Suddenly, she turned and walked up to me, handed me the box of cookies, then pointed to the box of old things in the corner. Inside were a few photos from our wedding, and the one she cherished, that worn-out notebook where I wrote the insurance terms for her. I froze for a moment, then I understood what she meant. I walked over and fished the notebook from the bottom of the box, dusted it off and handed it to her. She took the notebook, flipped to the last blank page, picked up a pen and began to write. Her hand was still shaking slightly, but her handwriting was slow and heavy. I dreamed of my parents. They were smiling at me in a place full of light. They don't seem to blame you. At this point, she paused for a long time. A small drop of ink blurred on the paper. Then she continued writing. I was wondering if you're only good to me out of guilt. Then why, when I stole that bread, was there only impatience in your eyes? And no pity. You just made a phone call, wanting to handle a nuisance. Why, when I agreed to marry you, did you freeze for so long? And then your ears turned red? She looked up, looking at me through a veil of tears, her eyes filled with immense confusion and a flicker of hope. She wasn't questioning me. She was asking me for an answer that could lead her out of this nightmare. I looked at her, and it felt as if a gentle hand had squeezed my heart. I took the pen and wrote beneath her words, stroke by stroke. Shen Youwei, I am not a good man. When I helped you, I didn't think that much. Maybe I was just in a good mood that day. Or maybe I just didn't want any trouble. When I married you, I wasn't even sure if it was love. I just felt at peace being with you. But now I know for sure. I can't bear to see you cry. I can't stand to see you bullied. When you're hurting, I wish I could take the pain for you. This has nothing to do with who my father was. It only has to do with you being Shen Youwei. If I must speak of guilt, my only regret is not meeting you sooner, letting you suffer so much, and for failing to protect you, letting you suffer again because of me. I handed the pen back to her. She looked at my words, and the tears fell even harder. She took the pen and firmly added 3 words after mine. Then she put the pen down, reached out her hand, and gently grasped my fingers. Her fingers were still cold, but that firm grip instantly dispelled all the gloom in my heart. That night, she finally stopped sleeping with her back to me. She curled up in my arms, like a fledgling that had finally found its nest, her breathing steady and deep. Listening to her breathe, I felt it was the most beautiful music in the world. We know the scars are still there, and perhaps they always will be, but we've begun to learn how to coexist with them. And because we bore this weight together, the bond between us has only grown stronger. The decision to leave this city was made a few days later, not entirely because of Jiang Shui's threats, but more because we wanted a change of scenery, a place without the shadows of the past. Transferring the lease, a true fresh start. Shen Youwei didn't hesitate for a second. For her, wherever I am is home. We sold the Shimmer Bakery, packed our bags, and prepared to move south. When the neighbors found out we were leaving, they all came to see us off, stuffing our hands with local specialties. "Sweetie, if you're ever mistreated, just come back. This old lady will stand up for you." She wiped her tears, holding Shen Youwei's hand. With reddened eyes, Shen Youwei nodded, pressing a bag of freshly baked cookies into her hand. The night before we left, we were packing the last of our things in the attic. Shen Youwei found an iron box at the bottom of the wardrobe. Inside were her grandmother's belongings, a few old photos, and the insurance terms I wrote for her back then. The paper had yellowed, but the writing was clear. "In case I ever hit rock bottom one day and end up begging on the streets, just remember to give me one bowl of food." Looking at the paper, she suddenly smiled, and as she smiled, the tears began to fall again. She took the pen and solemnly wrote a few words on the back before handing it to me. "In this lifetime, my bowl will always be half yours." My eyes grew hot as I pulled her into my arms. "Okay. As a promise." As the train started to move, this city that carried so much of our pain and tenderness gradually faded away outside the window. Shen Youwei fell asleep leaning on my shoulder, her hand still tightly clutching the corner of my clothes. Sunlight spilled across her face through the window, serene and peaceful. I leaned down and kissed the top of her head, closing my eyes. I don't know what the future holds, but as long as she's with me, wherever we go is home. We eventually settled in a small coastal town, using the money from the shop to open an even smaller dessert store, calling it Half Bowl of Time. Shen Youwei took charge of the baking. I took care of her. Life was poor but peaceful. She gradually stepped out of the shadows, and a smile returned to her face. Occasionally, in the dead of night, she would still wake up from a nightmare, but I would always hold her immediately, gently patting her back, until she fell asleep again. One evening, a year later, we walked hand in hand along the beach. The horizon glowed like molten gold, the setting sun was like molten gold. The tide surged gently. Shen Youwei suddenly stopped, pointing at something shimmering on the sand. I picked it up. It was a piece of sea glass, worn smooth by the waves, reflecting a warm glow under the sunset. She took the glass piece and looked at it in the sunlight for a long time. Then she placed it in my palm, closing my hand with hers, signaling me to keep it safe. I teased her, calling it a token of love. She nodded vigorously, her eyes sparkling. That afternoon, the weather was sultry. There weren't many customers in the shop. Shen Youwei was at the counter, preparing cake bases for tomorrow. I sat behind the counter checking the accounts. I heard a very faint sob. I looked up and saw Shen Youwei's hand stop, still holding the whisk, staring blankly out the window. Outside, a young father was walking by with his daughter on his back. The little girl's bell-like laughter drifted in through the glass. I put down the ledger and walked to her side. She didn't look at me, her gaze still following the father and daughter, until they disappeared at the end of the alley. Her profile, under the afternoon light, looked somewhat pale. In her eyes was something I couldn't describe, a complex mix of longing and sorrow. I gently touched her arm. She snapped back to reality and gave me a forced smile, shaking her head to show she was fine. Then she lowered her head, stirring the batter in the bowl even more vigorously, as if trying to drive something away. I knew she was missing her parents, the childhood that should have had parents' company. A childhood full of laughter and joy was a void she could never fill. Jiang Shui's words were like a poisonous thorn. Even on the sunniest of days, they would unexpectedly sting her. That night after closing, we sat on the small steps at the back door, feeling the sea breeze, the sound of waves gently lapping the shore. Distant fishing lights flickered. Shen Youwei leaned on my shoulder. It was quiet. I held her hand. Her palm was a bit cold. "Shen Youwei," I broke the silence. "Should we go visit them?" Her body stiffened slightly. She looked up at me in confusion. I chose my words carefully. Go visit your parents. I know where the cemetery is. It was in the information Jiang Shui left. Let's go and talk to them. Tell them that you're doing well now, and on behalf of my father, say I'm sorry. The last few words were exceptionally hard to say, but I felt they had to be said. Shen Youwei was stunned for a long time. Tears quickly welled up in her eyes, but she fought them back, refusing to let them fall. She looked at me. There was struggle in her eyes. There was fear, but it eventually turned into a decision. She nodded heavily. We chose a clear, sunny morning. We closed the shop. Carrying a bouquet, Shen Youwei made herself with white daisies and green lisianthus and went to the cemetery in the suburbs. The cemetery was very quiet, nestled against the mountains and facing the sea, a peaceful place of eternal rest according to the records. According to the records, February 2023. We found the joint headstone. The headstone was simple. It bore photos of Shen Youwei's parents, which had already become blurred. Shen Youwei walked to the grave, knelt down and gently placed the flowers. She reached out, using her fingertips, gently wiping away the dust and fallen leaves from the stone. Her movements were as gentle as touching a fragile dream. She didn't cry, she just wiped in silence. The sunlight hit her focused profile, giving her an almost sacred serenity. I stood behind her and stayed there in silence for a long while. She stood up, turned to me and beckoned.
I walked over
And stood beside her before the grave. The sea breeze brushed through our hair and clothes. Shen Youwei looked at the headstone, then looked at me. Then she raised her hand and began to speak in sign language. Her pace was very slow, as if every gesture was pouring out all her heart. Dad, Mom, this is Yifan, my husband. She paused, took a deep breath, and continued signing. He is very good to me. We have our own little shop, called Half Bowl of Time. Life is peaceful. I am content. As for the past, that was a terrible accident. I know it wasn't Yifan's fault. He is different from his father. Her gestures became heavy, but remained firm. She turned to look at me. Tears finally fell silently, but a smile lingered on her lips. She continued to tell the headstone, so please don't blame him, and don't worry about me. I am very happy now, really. Watching her introduce me to her parents in sign language, defending me, telling them of her happiness. My throat felt tightly blocked. My eyes grew hot. I reached out and tightly held her free hand. I bowed deeply toward the headstone. After straightening up, looking at the blurred photo on the stone, I said solemnly, Uncle, Auntie, I am Yifan. I'm sorry, and thank you. Thank you for bringing Shen Youwei into this world. Please rest assured, as long as I'm alive, I will never let her suffer again. I will use everything I have to protect her. I spoke slowly, every word coming from the bottom of my heart. I know verbal promises are flimsy, but it's the only thing I can do. The memorial was over. We walked hand in hand toward the hillside of the cemetery. On the way back, Shen Youwei seemed exceptionally relieved. It was as if a heavy burden carried for years had been lifted. She even pointed to the wildflowers by the roadside, excitedly gesturing to me, saying we could try using the juice from those flowers to create natural pigments. From then on, I noticed a subtle change in Shen Youwei. That faint, lingering haze in her eyes seemed to have faded away. Her smile grew brighter, more open and serene. She began to plan our future more proactively, like what flowers to plant in front of the shop, or whether, once we'd saved enough, we should rent the space next door to expand. She even gestured, suggesting that maybe one day we could adopt a child. I knew that visit to the cemetery wasn't just to find peace for her parents, but was also for the two of us, a formal farewell to the past. We couldn't change the tragedy that had occurred, but we could choose how to face the future. We took that half bowl of time, brimming with bitter memories, and carefully poured it away. Then, in the remaining half, we added understanding and acceptance, and the sweetness Shen Youwei had crafted herself, slowly and thoughtfully savoring the flavor of our remaining years. One day, after closing the shop, we sat by the sea watching the sunset. The setting sun dyed the ocean a magnificent golden red. Shen Youwei leaned her head on my shoulder and suddenly traced a few words in my palm. Not sign language, but writing with her finger. As I carefully read them, I saw she had written, "Half a bowl of time." Overwhelmed with happiness, I leaned down and kissed her hair.